data analysis in science. Since your ability to tackle different forms of data is vital for success on the GED Science test, this lesson will highlight what you need to know and do to be confident in your approach to much of the material that will be covered on test day. Now, before we handle the exercises and questions, let's take a look at what we're going to help you do in this lesson. Here we go. Whoa, look at these bullet points. Okay, so with practice, this lesson is going to help you first handle samples that are representative. Then, after we deal with that, we're also going to talk about applying formulas. And in addition to applying formulas, interpreting symbols in this scientific context. Next, analyzing data. Of course, that's a major part of the GED Science test. Then after that, data trends, so that you can make predictions. That's something to think about. Drawing conclusions comes from that as well. And of course, that's still based on data. And then the final two bullet points, things we're going to focus on, are sources of errors and biases. Wonder what that means. And then, of course, the stat concepts, the counting techniques, and probability. So, this is a lot of material to cover, but being able to handle this kind of material, it's going to give you the confidence you need to succeed on the GED Science test. Also, as you can see, much of what we're going to cover in this lesson has relevance for the other GED tests. So if you've studied for other GED tests before, you can use those skills in this science context. Or if you're currently studying or you're going to study for other GED tests, then some of these skills will help you later on. Yeah. Now, all you're going to need to do in this lesson is just stick with me and enjoy the experience of getting what you need for GED Science test day success. And the other thing I'll let you know is you can pause this video whenever you want. Sometimes I'll prompt you to do so. So just take your time with this material. Also, you can rewind it. You can go back through the video if needed as well. Just keep in mind that review paves the road to mastery. Never be afraid to go through something again. All right, so the first thing we're going to start with, of course, is this representative sample. What does this mean? Well, it's all about how samples pertain to populations. So the sample is a portion, a piece of the entire population being studied. So why do you think that sampling the entire population is important? Well, if you sample that entire population, then you don't have to deal with the whole group. So that's why the sample needs to be representative. If it is, then a portion of the group will represent the whole. And this is what scientists are looking for. They want to generalize based on this given information, and to do that, the generalization has to be valid. Again, this means that whatever they're choosing, whichever portion it is or sample, it must be both random and representative. So let's think about this for a sec. We hear about health studies all the time, right? Weight loss studies, exercise studies, and similar things. So let's say that a new study supports a brand new diet that helps study participants lose up to 30 pounds of weight in a month. Well, for this diet to matter to the rest of us, the people studied have to be representative of us, right? Otherwise, we should be skeptical of the results. For instance, if the study focused only on men, well, then women should be skeptical of whether that diet's going to work for them, right? Now, there's a typical way that scientists group study participants, and let's look at that right now. So there are two groups that we tend to need to deal with. The first is a test group, and these are the people who get that experimental treatment. So in the diet study, this would be the group of people who went on the diet. Now, the other group is the control group. They don't get the experimental treatment. So this would be the group in the study I talked about that would stay on their normal diet. Okay, so let's take a look at the basics for the formulas that will appear in the GED Science test next. So you might have to deal with one formula or more than one. So it depends on what's coming along with the science passage. So keep that in mind. But now let me ask you this. Can we use the calculator during the GED Science test? Think of your answer, and here it is. First of all, before we get to that answer, you don't have to memorize any science formulas. So keep that in mind. But your arithmetic skills are going to pay off. So adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing will come into play here. But there it is right at the end. You are allowed to use the calculator. All right. So here's what you need to do with the given science formulas in the questions. So first thing, identify each variable, what it represents. That's important. Then you want to find what's relevant. What's the relevant information to what you're being asked to do? And then the third and final thing is this. You might have to combine information from what's given. So what this means is that you're an investigator, right? You take what's given to you, you find what's important about it, and you use that to answer questions. Okay, in addition to formulas, which we'll talk about with greater detail a bit later, there are science symbols that may appear, and you'll need to understand them. So here we go with that. So for our symbols, when it comes to passages, of course, you might have to deal with symbols, and this will go along with scientific processes and ideas. So there are three common symbols that you want to be able to spot and understand. And here's a little chart for them. So the first is the positive symbol. So this is separating things. Reactants, which we'll see in a moment, what does that mean? And products. Now the yield symbol, this arrow, that's going to separate reactants from products. So the positive symbol separates reactants from each other or products from each other, while the yield symbol separates reactants from products. It also will tell us the direction of the reaction based on where it's pointed. Now this third symbol is the reversible reaction symbol. So in this case, the reaction goes both ways. Okay, so now that we've seen that, what are reactants, what are products? Let's look at that. A reactant is what changes in this chemical reaction. And a product is the result of the reaction. So just keep that in mind. Again, the reactant is what changes. The product is the result. And here's a chemical reaction that might be familiar. Now, this is a representation for carbon dioxide. So that's what we breathe out, right? So here's what we should go through. Let's piece together what we just talked about. What are the reactants in this process? Now remember, reactants can be separated by the positive symbol. So here they are. The carbon for C and the O2, the oxygen with two atoms. Next, again, we have that positive symbol which combines those two reactants. And then we have the yield symbol coming next. So what comes after the yield symbol? Well, that's the product. So our product is the CO2. It's the outcome of combining carbon and the oxygen with the two atoms. So now, after this, whenever you encounter these kinds of representations of chemical reactions on the GED Science test, and even in the outside world, you'll know what to do. You'll know what it means. You'll know how to translate it. It could be something as simple as referring to water as H2O, right? Okay, now, How do we translate given data for the GED Science test and beyond? Well, let's find that out next. So we have visual and numeric data here, and that can come in the form of charts, tables, or graphs. Now, the point here when you see this kind of data is to not overanalyze. We want to avoid doing that. So there's certain things that you want to look for. You want to be armed with that before test day. So what we want to do is make sense of the information. So we have this line graph now at the bottom right corner here. And to do that, you want to ask three things. The first is this: what's given from the labels, legend, and units of measurement? So for instance, with this example line graph, here is the title. We know it's salt solubility at various temperatures. That's what's going on. That's the kind of information we have here. Along the y-axis, that's going up and down. We have increasing solubility of the salt. So we can see, okay, going up and down along there, that's where we go and get the increasing solubility. Now going across the x-axis, that's left to right, we have the temperatures. And we can see those different temperatures starting with 0 degrees Celsius there. Also, the legend is right there. So we have different lines at different colors, and that represents different kinds of salts. So we can find the correct salt, its increasing solubility, along with the temperature based on that. All right, the next question to consider here is, what are the independent variables? And independent means that these are the variables that aren't affected by other things. So for instance, the temperature here is not affected by anything else in this line graph. So that would be independent. However, there are also dependent variables. So dependent variables are affected by other things. And in this case, the increasing solubility is affected by the temperature. So the temperature would be independent. The solubility is dependent. One more question to ask, and that's the relationships and trends. What are they? Now we can see that many of the lines here go up to the right in a straight line. So that's one trend. However, the blue line curves up to the right, while the purple line curves down to the right. So everything's not the same in this line graph. So if you ask these three questions, you'll be able to get that kind of quick and accurate overview of the given data without completely losing your mind. Okay, so let's put this to the test. Let's see whether this is going to work out with our first question. Here it is. So you can pause the video and take a look at this, get the lay of the land here, and once you're ready, restart it, and we'll work through it together. Okay, let's check each answer choice here in order to find the one that matches the correct order in the graphic. That's what they're asking for when they say describe the process depicted in the graphic. So just keep that in mind. So let's start with answer choice A, and we can go through to make sure that it has all correct parts. If it doesn't, it's incorrect. So the first thing in A, it talks about moist flowing air. Now if we check the graphic, yeah, that's where it's starting, right at the top in purple. So let's continue through A. After that, it talks about cooling and condensation, which again matches the graphic. So far, so good. Now let's continue. So note it's just a step-by-step process here. Then in answer choice A, it mentions precipitation and cloud development. Well, following the arrow in the process, in this graphic, that's exactly right. So in order, in answer choice A, it matches the order of the graphic. And that means what? Is this a correct choice? Did we find any problems? No, we didn't. So A, yes, that is correct. Okay, great. Now, let's look at another question. And this one's all about using the chemical reaction formula that we talked about a bit earlier. So here's question 2. Again, you can pause the video, take a look at this on your own, and then restart it when you're ready to work through with me. All right, now, when a GED science test question asks you about a chemical reaction or equation, it's best to go through the equation just as we talked about before with answer choice A in question 1. You want to go through bit by bit and focus on what you know to come up with the correct answer. So we're going to do that. Now remember the reactants. Where do they come? And we're dealing with this chemical reaction here. So don't let that intimidate you. Just lean on what we talked about. What are the parts? So again, the reactants are where? They're before the arrow. So we have 2 reactants there. Remember, they're separated by that positive symbol that we talked about. Now, the simpler of these 2 reactants is the 6O2. And the O represents what? We've seen it in H2O. We saw it in CO2. Well, it's oxygen, right? So that's where we're going here. So oxygen is a reactant. And this means since oxygen is a reactant, that answer choice D must be incorrect. It's the only choice that doesn't mention oxygen at all. So we can get rid of D. Yes, so you can keep track of your options as you go. That's going to help you to move forward to the correct answer. Okay, so based on the answer choices, and another thing about answer choices, you can check them for commonalities. That helps you to spot what they're actually looking for. So based on those answers, you know that glucose is involved as the other reactant. So we don't even need to worry about what that means, the C6H12O6. That's the glucose. And that takes care of the reactants. Now, it's time to take a look at what comes after that yield arrow in this chemical equation. And what's that called again? Before we have the reactants, after that yield symbol, it's the products, right? So we have 3 products here. Now, remember, what's H2O again? What does it stand for? And again, what does CO2 stand for? We talked about that before. Well, as we discussed before, and in real life, H2O is water, and CO2 is carbon dioxide. So we can note that. And the other product is just a word, that's energy. Now, based on these products, let's eliminate the incorrect answer choices that remain and select the correct answer choice. So what I'd like you to do now is pause the video to use the information on the slide to find the correct answer on your own. And after you've done so, play the video again to check your work with me. All right, so let's find the correct answer. To do that, we need to check each remaining choice's description of the products, right? The water, the carbon dioxide, and the energy. Now in choice A, water and carbon dioxide, they're not mentioned at all. So choice A is incorrect because it's missing important information. Goodbye. Let's move on to B. In choice B, water and carbon dioxide are mentioned, but energy isn't. So while choice B includes what was missing in choice A, it's still incorrect because it doesn't include energy in any way. Goodbye. And that leaves C as the correct answer. Yes, now choice C references water and carbon dioxide by stating that glucose is broken down in the presence of oxygen. And that's accurate. The glucose and oxygen are reactants that are broken down into 3 products. Also, since energy is one of the products in the chemical equation, energy is released. So again, C is absolutely right. All right, perfect. Now, let's see how samples and surveys could be tested via the next question. So here's question 3. Take a few moments, pause the video, get the lay of the land here, restart it when you're ready to go through with me. Okay, so let's dive in. Now, in our answer choices to this question, the why or why not, also will Luke have reliable data question, there are 2 broad responses, right? It's either yes or no. So we can start there. And by starting there, let's compare who Luke surveyed to who Luke wants to learn about, right? So who's filling out the survey here? Well, it's the soccer students who use the machines. But who does Luke want to learn about? Is it those soccer students? Well, no, it's all the students at his school. So, will Luke have reliable data if he surveyed only soccer students who use the machines? Well, no, that can't happen, right? So that's not going to be something we'll talk about in a moment, and something we've talked about before. I won't give it away yet. But since we know the correct broad answer is no, we can get rid of the yeses. Goodbye to C and D. Now, what's the problem with surveying only soccer students? So remember, we're dealing with samples. What do samples need to be, right? Well, they need to be representative, definitely. And that's the problem with surveying only soccer students. Soccer students who use the machines don't represent appropriately all the students at Luke's school. So, which of the remaining choices matches that? Is that choice A or choice B? Well, look at choice B. It mentions it's not a random sample of the relevant population, which goes to what we talked about earlier for samples. They need to be both random and representative. So B is correct. Yes. So you can start to see how laying the foundation earlier in this session pays off in the actual questions. And this is something you'll continue to see as you practice moving through the test day. All right,